Welcome back to Brian's Run Pod. Before I introduce you to Colleen, as with most of my interviews, I have split the interview into two parts. She is a very enthusiastic runner and has run regularly for most of her life. We talk about how from being a gymnast at school she transitioned into being a runner. Plus we talk about what training techniques and tech she uses for her runs. There are so many good takeaways in this episode. She quotes a well-known running writer who says that it's important to focus on what you can do rather than focus on what you can't. I really enjoyed the interview and I hope you do too. Apologies for the sound quality of my voice during the interview. This is all part of the podcasting journey. However, I'm really pleased we can hear Colleen loud and clear. So you're thinking about running, but not sure how to take the first step. My name's Brian Patterson and I'm here to help. And welcome to Brian's Run Pod. Okay, welcome back to Brian's Run Pod, and we have another guest. So today I'm going to be talking to my wife's friend Colleen, and she goes dancing with my wife, and we're just going to be talking about things in general. So without further ado, Colleen, can you just tell me about what was your, in terms of at school, did you do a lot of sport at school?
Oh, thanks, Brian. I did a lot of sport while I was in school, but not so much with school. A lot of it was, the running especially was outside, but I also did gymnastics while I was kind of a teenager and in secondary school.
Oh, right, okay.
But as far as running goes, I was doing quite a lot of running, but I actually wasn't running on a school team or anything like that. So it was completely outside of school that I did running.
Right. And were you always... were you quite enthusiastic about sport, or is it something that sport has come to you in later life?
Well, I never thought of myself as that good at sport, really, when I was probably primary school age or anything like that. But I did then become more and more confident by doing a bit of gymnastics. But I never saw myself as one of the really sporty people at school apart from that. So it's as I've, I suppose, got more mature, and the more I got into running, the kind of more I realised how important it would be to me and how much I really, really enjoyed it. So I think for me, it was kind of, I associated sport at school with kind of PE lessons. And for me, that, that wasn't really what motivated me, let's put it that way.
Okay. So when has running, or when have you become sort of quite... or when did running come to you in your later life after school?
Maybe I could. Well, I could say a bit about how I got. So I've kind of run in two stages in my life, funnily. So my dad was very into running in the 1980s. So I was a teenager, and what would happen is on a Saturday he'd kind of pack us all up in a car and we'd drive off and all go run either a 5K or 10K, and so I loved that. So that's what I mean by running outside of school. So I would then run after school, or then do these kind of local races at the weekends with my brothers and my dad. And so that I loved. I really enjoyed that. And I think the only downside was I probably did a little bit too much running like that as a teenager, and ended up with, so up into my early 20s I ran quite a lot, and then ended up with some stress fractures which kind of slowed me down for a while. And then I came back to running really in earnest probably about 10 or 15 years ago.
All right. And which part of the country, or is this, where were you from originally?
I was running in the US in the 1980s.
Oh, and wow.
Yeah, so that's where I was doing that. And then, but laterally, obviously, mainly running.
Yeah. Which part of the US?
The southern part.
Oh,
so
right.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
So yeah.
Okay. So So obviously running has been sort of part of your life for most, most of your life, that kind of thing. So you've always done it through, university, college, or that. What do you see as being kind of the main benefits to you?
I think now for me, it's very much fitness-wise, it offers a benefit. But I think because of the way I run now, there's a kind of social element, especially with things like parkrun.
Yeah.
But I also think just kind of well-being generally. So I tend to run in the middle of the day usually, and I always feel it gives me a bit of a pickup, and it just makes me feel better. I mean, really. So I think that as the older I get, I think the more that side of running is what's really important to me.
Okay. So I know mental health has become a bit of a buzzword. Do you find that helps you, because you're an academic? So do you feel it helps that you're able to get away from either the stresses of work and you're able to think through and through? Or?
Oh, absolutely. There's that. But there's also something about just having a complete break and just going out and just running and maybe listening to some music, but just having that space just to let your mind be. And and maybe you sometimes think through things or solve things, but typically I just like the kind of openness of going for a run. And also I like getting out into kind of nature a bit with running. So running in Crane Park or Bushy Park or Richmond Park. And there's something just, it's lovely to be running amongst the deer or running under trees or whatever. I've really, so there's that side of things that I think is it's just really restorative. It just, I think somebody said you never regret coming back from a run. You never feel, I regret having gone for a run. And I think there's so much to that. I always feel just a bit more alive, just a bit happier when even if I'm exhausted, when I come back. So I think that really, and I feel a little bit antsy if I go for a long period of time without running.
Are you so from what you're describing, you very much take very senses with your running. Are you analytical about your running? Do you look at stats?
Oh yeah. I do. I can be a bit of a Strava nerd. So did parkrun this morning, and what do I do? The results come in. I'm looking. Okay, where did I finish in my age group? With my faster, slower? Blah, blah, blah. I probably do a little bit too much of that kind of thing, but I do that side of things as well, for sure.
Do you do anything training wise, anything specific training wise, intervals, tempo running or lung running, or is it very much just out the door?
I try to do a kind of one fast run a week. So typically I might use parkrun as like a really that's where I'll run a much faster pace than I would any other time in the week. What I sometimes do is like a little bit of fartlek running, maybe one run during the week. I would try and say, okay, I'm going to run as fast as I can for the next song or for the next for the next 0.2 of a mile or whatever, and then slow it down and pick it up and then the rest of the time, I'll probably just go out the door and run. And if I'm left to my own devices, I'd run quite slowly. So sometimes I think, okay, I really probably want to pick up the pace a little bit here. But for me, it's more about distance than time. So when I go out the door, I'll say, okay, I want to run whatever, 4 miles, 7 miles, 5 miles, whatever. That's my sort of goal most of the time, rather than pace.
Right.
But then I try and have one fast run a week. So it's kind of a really rough rule of thumb. It's not
what's
too
the furthest
systematic.
You've run?
Probably I've done one virtual marathon, so that would be the furthest. But I have it. But that was during COVID, so it was a kind of a lockdown one where you did the virtual London. But but the furthest race wise I've run would be half marathons.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you like treadmill running?
Not really. I've done a bit in the past, but no, I'm not. I'd much rather be outside, if I'm honest, or on a track, but not treadmills. I'm not really that keen on.
No. Okay. I've only just. I hated them last year, but now I've joined a gym, which is very near, 5 minutes from where I work, and I've only just gone into it. Sort of thing. I think because you can kind of, if I play with the speed, it kind of makes it more interesting. So
Yeah, and it is a way. So in my last job, there was a gym on site, and I would use a treadmill probably once or twice a week, and that was a way of getting a run in the winter if I didn't want to run in the dark. But it's not something I would choose to do if I had a choice of running indoors or outdoors.
So during the winter, do you run during the day then?
Yeah, I mean, I run at night in the dark if I absolutely have to, but I don't like it. So I try and find a way of running in the daylight.
Okay. Have you done any of these sort of like community? I know, what was it? The sweatshop used to do it. In Teddington,
and Up and Running one.
For those listeners who aren't in the local area, there is a local shop who, and I think there's another local shop that they'll meet up and then they'll go out for a run as a group sort of thing. Have you done anything like that? Or?
Do you know, I haven't.
You're quite solitary.
I am.
Apart from the park run.
I think probably I've run with running clubs a handful of times, and I'm sure it would make me maybe a faster runner, but I much prefer to run on my own. I think I think I just like setting my own pace, doing my own thing, and so no, I haven't run with any of those groups.
Okay.
It might be something I try in the future. Do you do that at all?
No, I haven't. I mean, it just sort of. I think when I get home, I just want to put my stuff on, and I just want to go out the door, sort of thing, and just do it. So yeah. I think a long time ago, I think I may have done it once or twice, but yes, I think park run's probably the only thing in terms of doing it. As part of the community.
And from that really suits me because there you're still doing what you're doing at your own pace, but you can also see people say hi. There's a bit of a social element to it at the start and at the finish.
Yeah.
And I think so you feel like you're with people, and that's really enjoyable. But at the same time, you're still running at your own pace, and you don't have to worry about either keeping up with somebody else or feel you're going a bit too slowly, whatever.
So, in terms of injuries, how have you been?
Well, I seem to get injured quite a lot.
Oh, really?
But I think I've got to the stage where I've decided I'm never going to run completely and utterly pain-free again. So I just, rather than wait till that day arrives, I just kind of try to get on with it and do the best I can. I did have quite a serious... both knees got injured probably about 3 or 4 years ago, and that was pretty bad. And but I've managed to come through that, and I just got to the point I decided, well, I can either feel like I'm in pain and be unfit, or I could be in pain and be fit. So I just typically, as much as possible, try to keep going, and I've more recently become quite a fan of sort of jeffing if I'm feeling a bit. Trying to keep up with some running, but not feeling absolutely completely injury free. So we'll run 2 minutes, walk 3 minutes, so that kind of thing, just to keep keep things ticking over if I need to.
Okay.
So I think when I was younger, if I even sniffed an injury, like, oh my goodness, I've got to stop completely until everything's healed, and I've really need to watch out for that. But now I kind of think, well, if I did that every time I felt an ache or a pain, I'd never run again. So, I just try and carry on now as much as I can, unless obviously I don't do stupid things, but that's my philosophy.
Younger, when I used to have problems with my knees, but I think maybe because I was just wearing the wrong shoes. I think now shoes these days are, you get so much good advice about wearing shoes and that kind of thing. So
I think they've changed dramatically. I mentioned earlier that I had, in my 20s, I had 2 really bad stress fractures, and I just couldn't. Every time I'd start to run, they'd come back in. But I think the change in shoes has meant I never have that problem now, and I'm sure it's down to the way the shoes reposition your foot now, and the way that was very different to what was going on in the 80s and early 90s.
So, do you have any sporting heroes, or have you?
I've been thinking about this. So I think there's a group of women marathoners, probably again, who were really hitting their prime in the 1980s, that really inspired me then, because I would have been a teenager and I was really looking up to these women. And so people like Greta Wietz and Ingrid Christensen from Norway was another one.
And the American who won the first marathon.
Well, there's Catherine. There's Rosa. I can't think of her surname. But the main one, actually, because Wendy Sly was another one. I really liked Wendy Sly. It was interesting. Many years ago, my brother was living not too far from here, and he turns out he was living next door to her sister. So so that was quite exciting. Okay. But I think my biggest sporting hero would be Joan Benoit Samuelson, as she is now, who won the Boston Marathon numerous times. And what I love about her is she's still running. So I think earlier this week she turned 66, and she's run. And I feel like she even may have run London, the most recent London Marathon. I'm not sure, but she's run Boston every decade, and I want to say something like she still runs under 3 hours. But what I really like, I've always just really admired her. But so many runners who are really brilliant professionals retire once they're no longer at the absolute peak of their career. And it's so wonderful to see somebody like her just still run. Really, if what you're looking for is a role model as you enter kind of the later stages of your kind of running, it's great to have someone like that. And so it's really nice to be able to see women, well, and men, but for me particularly women runners who are like in their late 60s, 70s and so on, continue to really thrive at long distances like that.
Because I know on the news there was something about a Japanese runner. Her claim to fame was that she was at the Olympics, the first marathon, women's marathon at the Olympics, the 84 one. But I can't remember what it was. If it was in particular why she was on the news or something, or I don't know how.
Was she also trying to set a record at London? I thought.
I think she may have been going. Yeah, I think maybe that was the reason that
she was in the news. It was something like that, but I can't remember. I want to say she's around 75, maybe, something and like it was something about running the fastest marathon in the 75 plus age group, something like that. I feel like she didn't quite get there, but she's still astounding what she did. Yeah. And also, I'll tell you the other set of really kind of sporting heroes for me, again, as a really young runner, were the middle distance kind of Olympic runners from Great Britain. So I'm thinking about like Sebastian Coe, Steve Ovett, Steve Cram, all of those. It was so exciting to just watch them and follow their career. And I had younger brothers who were quite fast runners, and we used to just love watching them at like big international
it was kind of
games.
Well, that 80-84 period, because you kind of had two kind of very opposing views of running. Who you had Sebastian Coe, he was trained by his dad, and you had this Steve Ovett who kind of broke all the rules. And he was
absolutely, and it made it so exciting.
Exactly.
It really was.
For me, I remember talking to Katie's mother about this, Katie, my wife's mother, and then because I used to love Steve Ovett because when he ran, he was just effortless. It was just like he was on thin air. That was quite a they're extraordinary human beings. I mean, these people, it's just
But as like a teenager, I'd be reading Runner's World and all of this, reading about everything. really, really inspired by people like those running at that level.
But going on about that, because I know about women in sport and whatever. Do you think, from your perspective, that's kind of push women to the forefront in terms of sport? I mean, I'm not wanting to go into the gender politics about it, but do you think, either running has kind of come late to the party, or is it just that, the evolution of sport and women have kind of pushed themselves through,
Well, I think it's certainly... I think women runners have a much higher profile now than they would have. I mean, since... how long has it been? Maybe since the 70s that women were even running kind of marathons, and I forget when it was added to the Olympics as a category. But I think of people around the era of Paula Radcliffe, and it seems to me that she has been such a great ambassador for the sport, in terms of really raising the profile. And now you look at, for example, in the London Marathon recently, in some ways, the women's race was more talked about than the men's in terms of the absolute excitement of that finish. That was extraordinary. And so my sense, I was thinking about this too, because the other thing I think that's changed, and it could be for both men and women, is that you see many more middle-aged and older runners, I think, than perhaps you did when I first started out in running, and maybe just all kinds of runners, because I remember when I would go to sort of 10K, 5K races a long time ago, everybody looked like they were kind of from a running club. There was a certain look and there was a certain age range. And it's nothing like what it looks like at Parkrun now, for example, or the London Marathon now, or the fact that you can turn up to a race and there'll be people who are going to walk the whole thing. And you think, and everything in between, I think... So
it's more inclusive.
I think it's much more inclusive, and I think that's brilliant. I think it's much more about, welcoming a range of people and really celebrating what running can do for everyone's fitness. It's not just, still being elite is part of it, and that's exciting, but it's much more open. And I think that's, for me, the really big change.
Yeah. So, what would you, let's say, if someone wanted to get into running, what kind of advice would you give if they're kind of a little bit hesitant about it, or whether it's kind of like, I'd like to, but I'm kind of, maybe it's not for me, or what kind of advice would you give?
I think I'd say map out a route of maybe a mile. So a really nice, pretty route. Start out walking it, and then say, okay, I'm going to run for 30 seconds every 5 minutes or something like that, and just gradually build up. And really, so I guess a kind of couch to 5K approach, but if even 5K seems like a kind of a daunting prospect, I'd say try and take a beautiful walk and just gradually add in running. And I think, walking 3 minutes, running a minute, whatever, is not really that hard once you get started. And I'd say give it a go and try it until you can run the whole distance, and just see how you feel, see what it offers you. And also think about finding your local park run and possibly starting out just walk it, just say I'm going to walk it, and but I remember I felt quite nervous about the idea of running park run before I did it. Okay. And I thought, okay, I've got to be running at a certain pace and so on before I can even turn up, which obviously is nonsense. It's not the case. But if you were to feel like that, that's why I was suggesting find your own little route to start with, and just see if you enjoy it. But the other advice I would give is get a decent pair of shoes. That would be the main thing. Have a decent pair of shoes, and just try it out.
Yeah. Because there's so much more. It's not just about the running and doing the exercise. Like you said, it's about enjoying what's around you.
Yeah.
And just becoming in that moment sort of thing. And like you said, and I think you explained it very well, is that once you finished it, you just feel that, you kind of, it's argued as being that kind of endorphin or that euphoria that you have at the end of it, and it's kind of like, that was pretty good. I didn't want to get,
Oh, the number is so hard. I sometimes spend more time convincing myself to go out than I'm actually going to run, And then I think, what took me so long? I'll tell you the other thing I really like about running regularly is you never feel out of breath in the rest of your life. So if you have to walk up 4 flights of stairs, you can just do it. If you have to run for a bus, you can just do it. Yeah. There's something really quite empowering about that, about just having a certain base level of fitness in your everyday life. So anything else you're taking on, it gives you a kind of confidence. I mean, you mentioned earlier that I dance with Katie, and one of the great things about having a base level of running fitness is that you could do any kind of exercise class.
That's true.
And know that you can keep up, at least from a kind of conditioning perspective.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's a nice little
but also
quality to have.
In that, one complements the other to a certain extent, So,
That's right. So I think, dance maybe gives you a certain level of flexibility and maybe a sense, a good quality of balance. You're right. There are features there that support the running too.
Yeah. I think without a doubt. Are there any frustrations for you when it comes to running? I mean, I know we talked about the injuries, but is there? I don't know. It could be. I don't know. I've never managed to get under such a time for 5K or 10K or whatever, or it could be anything.
Yeah, I think frustrations that I'm trying to let go of are that when you get to kind of late middle age, you realise that probably your best times are behind you, even though live in hope. But so I think you've kind of got to let that go. I think the other frustration I find now is that I probably, whereas I used to be able to run easily 6 days a week, now I think that's just, I can't run. I need to have a little bit more recovery time in between runs. So I wouldn't run that much now. I probably run 3 or 4 times a week now.
Right.
I think probably biggest frustrations are I'd like to go further and faster, but I'm always got one eye on potential injury. That's probably the biggest frustration. But I try and just to say, okay, so these are the constraints. How can we live within that? And probably if I did a little bit more in the area of conditioning, and I was going to ask
if you did do that.
Well, as I say, do dance classes. I do a little bit of kind of strength work, but not nearly what I probably should do. So I think that's something I probably need to focus a bit more on.
Yeah, because I know the interview with Stuart Hayes, the triathlete, he wished he did more when he was, or more sport specific, sort of weight training, strength training sort of thing.
Yeah. So I think that's probably, I think that's something I'm going to try and do a little bit. I mean, I do it, but it's kind of like, oh, maybe I should do that now. It's not a systematic thing, Wednesday, Friday and Monday I'm going to do this kind of work, and then I'm going to do this on Tuesdays. So I probably need to have a bit more of a plan. Funnily, I was talking with a good friend of mine who's a local runner this morning, and she was telling me she's got a running coach, and that's been a game changer for her. Really? She's a great runner, and so she's encouraging me to think about that, and somebody who would say, really looking at how you run and what you're doing, what your goals are, these are the things I would suggest. And I think having someone like that would also probably keep me to account a bit as well, because I can read all the time about how great it would be to do these things, but I think it helps if I've got to answer to somebody.
Yeah. I mean, I've said, strength and conditioning is great, but also I've said in the past is what helps me has been to follow a plan. So I don't know if you're one of those people who likes to have, I used to do the Runkeeper plan. I'm sure there are other available workouts out there. But, and that kind of gave me a bit more of a focus and a direction as to, in 12 weeks' time, I'm going to do, this, whatever. Has that helped you, or you don't need that motivation?
No, I have done, when I've done half marathons, I've always had a kind of rough plan that either I would have downloaded from the site itself or got from elsewhere. And even though I wouldn't follow it absolutely religiously, I would absolutely try and say, okay, I'm 5 weeks away. I should really be doing a 12-mile run this week or whatever, that kind of thing. So I've usually used those to firstly make sure I get a long enough run in, and also try to look at the overall miles for the week and try to fit them in, even if I'm doing a slightly different configuration than what the plan does. So I've not followed plans really tightly, but I have kind of generally used them to organise my running. If that makes sense, it's kind of a halfway house, really. Yeah.
But do you do I know some people, and I've heard some runners say, if I do this kind of time trial, I know where my fitness level is, or something like that. So, let's say I do I'm training for a half marathon, and if I do a 10K and I'm doing it at this time, I said, I know I'm ready for that. I know I'm ready for it. Have you kind of done?
So the way I've done something really similar, I usually look at minutes per mile. So if I know I want to run a half marathon around 2 hours, that's whatever that's going to be, a 9:15 or 9:08 or whatever it is, minutes per mile. So I need to therefore, in my longer runs, be sure I can know what that feels like.
Oh yes.
So that's what I do. And I also try to sometimes extrapolate from my 5K runs to say, okay, I'm running, this pace. I should be doing a 10K therefore in, 55 minutes or something like that. Right. But if I know I can do this pace for 5K, if I make it a little bit slower, but not too much, I should be able to do this for 10K, that kind of thing. So, so I often work on kind of minutes per mile and work it that way.
Okay.
That's it for another episode, and looking forward to speaking to you next week with some beginner hints and tips about running. I just want to let you know that you can follow me on X, or what was known as Twitter, at Brian's Run Pod. I have just recently set up a Facebook page which is called Brian's Run Pod, and I am on Instagram at Brian's Run Pod. Also, my website is www.briansrunpod.co.uk, where you can get show notes, or on whatever podcasting app you are listening to the show. Plus, all my episodes have chapter markers if you need to get to different segments of the show. Plus, leave a review, as it will help others find this podcast. Music is Happy Day by Stock Audio, not forgetting artwork by Alice Patterson. Till next week, thanks again for listening.